had some requests, so what I'm going to do is address one of those today. And the question that I was asked is, we're kind of like, what's the involvement of ETs at this time on Earth? So this usually isn't my genre. Usually I just channel on wisdom, not so much like it's kind of more like remote viewing, in my opinion, which is not something that I have practiced, but I'm getting requests for this kind of stuff. So look, I'll just have a go and see what comes through. The safety net I have is that if this is garbage, I just won't put it online. so really I just got to come at it with the attitude of whatever, who cares, because ultimately when the channel's done, then I can decide if anyone's going to see it. So it really is nothing to lose. So what involvement do ETs have at this time on Earth? And this is regarding sort of what's going on Earth right now. Okay. Greetings and thank you for the question. What involvement do ETs have on your planet at this time? Let us begin by saying this is a more complex question than it appears, because your planet is within the jurisdiction, you could say, of larger organizations, which are within the jurisdiction of yet larger organizations, and so on. So although there are some ET influence occurring literally on your planet right now, there is also the influence which is occurring from afar, meaning that your planet is left in relative purity, or is in a sense protected as you would understand it on your planet when there is a nature reserve, where there are species within that area that you wish to protect so that they can continue to develop in a very natural way and not be threatened by the incursion of other species or of humanity itself. In a similar way, your planet is in a zone of protection. And so while there is not direct influence from this, there is the absence of influence, which is a form of influence in itself. And so this is why it is a more complex question than it appears. But we understand you asked this question in a specific sense regarding who is on your planet now and what influence are they having in the machinations of your societies and the decisions and the way that your planet is being ruled, shall we say. So let us begin by saying, in regard to this particular way of looking at E2 influence on your planet, that there is a controlled demolition of a extraterrestrial influence that has been on your planet for a long time relative to a human lifespan, that have been using your planet as a resource. And the relationship they have with humanity is one without compassion. It is one without a sense of love for humanity, because they are a species which is far more advanced than humanity and has been aware of humanity from a time when humanity was still relatively unevolved. And they also follow a philosophical path which does not lend itself to compassion, to love, to caring. And so their relationship with humanity has primarily been one of farmer and livestock. It is a relationship which has had a parasitic dynamic, where humanity has been, in a sense, farmed as a resource for these beings to exploit for their own benefit, with little regard for what happens to humanity other than it remains a viable resource for their exploitation. So this system of exploitation and this parasitic relationship they've had with humanity, although humanity has mostly been unaware of it, although some at privileged levels who work in cooperation with these ETs to ensure that humanity is maintained as a crop for exploitation, is coming to an end. It is being dismantled, not because they have contravened a set of boundaries which has brought them to the attention of caretakers, those that sort of maintain the nature reserve status of the earth, because it has always been within the realm of awareness of those that maintain the nature reserve status of the earth and the entire solar system. But instead, what has occurred is the calling of humanity has reached a level where now the manifesting collective power of the earth human is calling to this planet a benevolence, a type of kindredness with other ET groups which have interpreted the energetic frequency coming from the earth now at this time as a call for assistance and a permission for the assistance to be received. And so if the ETs that are responding act in a way which is political, you could say, in the service of humanity, and results in the dismantling of this parasitic structure from these beings which have been exploiting the earth human, then it would not be a contravention of the free will of humanity. Because humanity is, as a whole, although still relatively unconsciously, requesting that this is done. So, for those ETs that are now here assisting with this dismantling and the relative cleansing to the degree which they perceive they have received permission from the humanity being, which is the combined being of humanity, their presence is something that they have been willfully eager to provide for a long time, because it has, in a sense, pained them to observe what has been occurring on Earth and the degree of exploitation and foisted darkness that humanity has been dealing with. However, although it has been uncomfortable and awkward to observe humanity suffering within this paradigm of exploitation, the benevolent ETs, we shall call them, understood that this was part of the journey of humanity, and to contravene before humanity had asked would be a denial of the service of growth that comes from this exploitative relationship they are having with the ETs that have come to farm humanity as a resource. So, to make sense of this, why there would be ETs that are parasitic, so we shall call them the parasitic ETs, that they could come and make a crop out of humanity, and yet the benevolent ETs would stand by and allow this to happen. So from the perspective of humanity, it would seem, why would the benevolent ETs form a type of protective reserve for humanity, for the solar system, but allow the entrance of these exploiters, these parasitic ETs? And it is very similar, the explanation, to the reason that now the benevolent ETs have decided to come in and assist with the dismantling and the cleansing of this parasitic dynamic. Meaning that the state of humanity at the time that these parasitic ETs entered into the solar system and began their parasitic relationship, not just with planet Earth, but also with other planets within the system prior to arriving at Earth, is because at that time, the solar system beings, which includes the beings of not just Earth, but other planets within the solar system, was, in a very broad manifesting sense, calling to it this type of parasitic ET, because the calling was a collective manifestation, and from a very expanded self-identity, where you could say that the solar system is in one entire being, and all of the beings of the solar system are the sentience of the solar system being. This group sentience was desiring the opportunity for growth, and because of the uniqueness of the sentience of the solar system, which is this capacity to self-identify as both the light and the darkness, this state of spiritual dichotomy, which makes the sentient beings of your solar system so unique. The non-physical aspects of this being, meaning that the higher self of each of the sentient beings collectively, understanding that they are not a dichotomous being, but in fact are a single being, meaning that they are a unity. They are entirely of the light. And so they are not of the light and of the darkness, as they believe while identifying as the avatar in this temporary physical experience, but in their awakened state, the energetic version of themselves which animates the avatar. This higher self understands that they are entirely of the light, and yet because of their uniqueness, this is unknown, and the uniqueness when they are incarnate in the physical body as a spiritually dichotomous being, the very unique state of beings in this solar system. They understand to be able to transcend from this state of spiritual dichotomy to a state of spiritual unity, where they identify of themselves in full realization, remembering that they are entirely of the light, while still within the avatar. Making this recognition requires a very extreme and profound type of pushing, suppressing into the darkness, so that it forms a polarity which is so extreme in all of creation that the attraction of the poles as they become further and further apart becomes so pronounced that the darkness eventually, theoretically, will catapult them, will springboard them into the light. And so they shall ascend, transcend, transition from a state of spiritual dichotomy into a realization of themselves entirely of the light. And so, the sentience, this group sentience of the solar system being, which includes you, includes beings from other planets within your solar system, collectively, although unconsciously, while incarnated in the avatar, manifested this parasitic relationship. And at the time, those who are guardian, the benevolent ETs, who are guardian of this system, which was set up as an experiment to see what would be the consequences of incarnating species into existence that were born into a state of spiritual dichotomy and had no recognition that they are in fact entirely of the light and connected to the one, connected to all things. What would be the repercussions of such a form of life? And initially, when these parasitic ETs came into the system, those that had designed the experiment perceived it as tragic, as a contamination of the experiment, rendering it a complete waste, a total failure. However, despite calls to end the experiment and start again, there were those who were party and observer to the experiment that said, no, let us continue to observe, because it is our belief that the light always finds a way. And so, the experiment was allowed to continue. And over time, particularly in the last decade, last 2 decades, and even more so in the last 5 years, it has become patently obvious that the parasitic ETs entering the experiment was an essential ingredient to the final crossing of the threshold into the awakened state of each individual consciousness within this sentience of the solar system, which includes humanity, to fully awaken as a being which is not dualistic. It does not have a state of spiritual dichotomy. I am the darkness, I am the light. I love those people. I hate those people. This state of dichotomy is only possible in a being that does not realize what it is. Because when a being realizes what it is, and that it is the love and light of the one, eternally connected to the one, because it is the one, then it cannot hate anything. It is beyond its capacity to have hate. Because it is a being entirely of the light, and being a being entirely of the light, all there is to give is love and its derivatives. So, this is the gloriousness of the one. The incredible symbiosis it has with all aspects of itself. So even when the most toxic attaches itself to the most vulnerable, while it appears to be an evil infestation, it is in fact the necessary dynamic for a blossoming and birthing, emerging from the chrysalis into the full scope of potential that the solar system sentient beings possess. However, the experiment has not been without casualty. There are planets within your system where this dynamic played out, and the end result at this time was that the darkness prevailed and the light did not make it fully into emergence. And these parasitic ETs maintained a level of control which became inescapable. And so there was not the birthing into the light. However, what we anticipate is going to become the new status quo of the solar system and the solar system sentient beings is that the birthing of the light on planet Earth will have a repercussive effect across the rest of the solar system being, which is so profound that it is going to be a awakening event. And so even those species within your solar system which were precursors to what has occurred on your planet, meaning that they were infected parasitically by these parasitic ETs before it occurred on Earth. And the experience of explosive realization into the light, which is looking very, very, very likely is going to occur on planet Earth, will in a way be a shockwave of light which cracks the mold and the stronghold of the parasitic ETs that are still maintaining this total reign of darkness, to a degree where it will be the beginning of the end for them, and then eventually the entire combined sentience of the solar system will emerge into the light. So, let us speak a little more specifically about what is occurring on your planet in the way that this stronghold of the parasitic ET is being dismantled. The parasitic ETs are very advanced in their technology and also in their capacity to use the energy of their mind to create a perceived reality which is not the true reality. They are very skilled, and this is something they have been doing for so long that it is like an industry for their race. So they go throughout the cosmos and parasitically look for hosts who then they can, in a very surreptitious way, create a type of dynamic where they convert the hosts into a resource without the host having any awareness that this is occurring. And having done this many times before arriving on planet Earth, they are very skilled. It is an industry. They have programs to educate their own race on how to be an effective contributor to this industry. And so they arrived at Earth already very skilled in this way of maintaining themselves. Because ultimately they do it because it is just the way that they survive. It is the path they have chosen for continuing on their genes and ensuring that they have successive generations following and continuing their genes into the cosmos. Because this is a very fundamental desire of all life everywhere. And so, while the consequences of their philosophy is suffering, it is not a reason to condemn them. It is just a choice of the available choices there are to live in this existence. Because ultimately it is just the one playing with the illusion of more than one so that it can know itself to completion through experience. So all experience is relative. All experience is a form of honouring of the one. So, as they are beings that have chosen the philosophical path of darkness, then they have denied or surrendered or given up some of the capacities which come from being on the philosophical path of light. So they deny their connection to the one, because imbued in the connection of the one are emotional qualities which would make them ineffective in the path they choose. And these emotional qualities include love, compassion, empathy, and so on. And if they are allowing themselves to be imbued with the energy of the one, which is their birthright by just existing, then this would render them less capable of exploiting the hosts they decide to parasitically extract the resources they require from. And so they have denied their connection to the one and following the philosophical path of darkness. But imbued in this connection to the one is not only love, compassion, empathy, but also profound gifts, which will, as humanity ascends further and further through the densities and they become more awakened to the reality that they are in fact the one, then they will more and more be inundated with the love and light of the one through this connection they share with the one, because they are the one. And in this relationship with the one, this growing, increasing influx of energetic birthright is this expanding capacity to do what appears to be magic, to have abilities which seem to be impossible to the Earth unit at this time. And the reason that we were making this point is because the parasitic ETs, although powerful compared to the human, are relatively inert compared to beings which are fully awakened, advancing technology, and have a high density state, allowing them a very large connection to the energetic input from the One by virtue of their birthright. So that to these beings which are very awakened in a high density state, who have been observing and protecting the Earth and allowing these parasitic ETs to be there, the parasitic ETs to them are very not so much. They're not a threat. They're not something which is difficult to deal with. And so the disparity between the power of the parasitic ETs to humanity, where they are much more powerful than humanity is at this time, is even less so than the disparity between these parasitic ETs and those ETs which have been guardians of the Earth experiment and the solar system experiment for a long time. And so it has never been an issue for them, it has never been difficult for them to come in and cleanse the Earth of these parasitic ETs. It has never been something that has been a challenge for them because they are so much more powerful by virtue of their relationship and the philosophical path of light that they have chosen. Because light is a much greater power than darkness. Darkness is low frequency, light is high frequency. And so you can see when something is low frequency, it is a smaller amount of energy passing through a unit of space, a unit of time, however you determine to measure it. However, light is a much higher frequency, meaning that there is a much greater amount of energy passing through the unit that you choose to measure it in. And so, those that have taken the philosophical path of light and have reached certain density states are much more powerful to an exponential extent than those that have chosen the pathway of darkness. Therefore, the only thing that was allowing the parasitic ETs to continue to farm the hosts of the solar system, meaning Earthlings and the other sentient species, was that the benevolent ETs were waiting, observing, and being aware that the time to intervene was not now, but will be the time when the Earth human and the sentient solar system of the solar system collectively manifest a calling for there to be a cleansing, which has occurred, which is happening now. Now, this possibly raises the question, when the parasitic ETs came into the Earth experiment, or the solar system experiment, and the benevolent ETs initially were not quite sure what to do, you could ask, well, if these are higher density beings that are very aware and awakened and connected to the One, how could they not know what to do? And the reason that they did not know what to do is because it is what is occurring here in your solar system is literally unprecedented. There is no knowledge of something like this occurring ever before anywhere in existence. If it has occurred before, it is something that we have never heard of. We have no awareness that this has occurred before, and we have a very expanded awareness. We are in communication with other species who collectively expand vast distances beyond even this galaxy. And yet we have never heard of such a experiment occurring. And this such experiment that we refer to is this unique way of being born into existence where you have no concept that you are connected to the one, that you are part of the one, that you are the one, and instead identify yourself as just this avatar, which is completely separated from anything else, which creates the environment for you to mistakenly identify with the darkness. I am sad, I am angry, I am hateful, I am fearful. At the same time, identifying with the light. So it's not a philosophical choice, it is literally a misunderstanding of self, allowing the state of spiritual dichotomy to exist within a single being. This is unprecedented. And as it is unprecedented, then when these parasitic beings came into the solar system, it was not known what to do, because it was unknown what the consequences would be. There were some who said this is terrible, and there were some who said this is perfect. And as it has unfolded, it has now become apparent that you could say that it was perfect. And of course, all of existence is perfection. So, we apologize for becoming sidetracked in speaking specifically about what the benevolent ETs are doing to dismantle this parasitic structure that has been built by the parasitic ETs. So, the very first thing that was done is to just render mute or impotent the technologies which the parasitic ETs are using to control and diminish and inhibit the latent capacities within the humanity being. And when this was performed, which was earlier in the previous decade, then really it was not much more that was required, because when this inhibition, which was both technological and psychological and engineering through the system of culture on your planet, the humanity being naturally started to expand into itself in the absence of this inhibition. And as this has occurred, you will have noticed on your planet there is much upheaval. There is much people coming together to protest the life they have been forced to live. And this is a natural percolation of the beginnings of realization of one's true nature as the light. And knowing that you are a divine being of the light, you understand that you deserve to be treated honorably, with dignity, with integrity, with respect, with love, with kindness, with compassion, with consideration. You understand these are your birthrights. And to be foisted into darkness, to be inhibited, to be pushed to do things you don't want to do, you understand is a contravention of what is right and natural. And this is a growing momentum on your planet. And all that was required to get this underway was a shutting down of the systems of inhibition which have been placed on your planet. Now, as we get into the final stages of this shedding of the old way, there is more of a requirement to intervene in a more visceral way, more tangible way. So there are some factions of this parasitic ET that refuse to give up what they have spent so much time and energy creating as a resource for themselves. So it is a great loss for them. It is a collapsing of an empire or an outpost of their empire. And there is great shame for those that have been anointed with the title of, shall we say, Chancellor, and those associated to their supreme leaders. To lose an outpost that has required so much investment is a great shame, is something which will indelibly scar their reputation until the end of time, and including the generations of their bloodline that shall follow. And so it is with great sacrifice that they walk away from what they have built here. And so they cling very tightly to the hope and the belief that they can turn it around. And while many of the co-conspirators have seen the writing on the wall and have fled voluntarily, because they can see that it's all over, there is no point in staying, there is still this small group which have a belief they can turn it around, but even they don't really believe that. It is more that they want to be seen in the eyes of their leaders, their supreme leaders, their royalty, that they did everything that was possible, that they left no option uninvestigated, that they did all that could be done, in the hope that when they do finally leave, which they know is almost inevitable, that they will be received not as failures, but as loyal servants of the empire that did all that was required and more to ensure the success of their lords and masters. So, in a way, you could say it is theatre. The parasitic ETs understand and fully accepted that it's all over. Their time here is done and they shall not succeed. However, they want to not just flee, but instead to be removed, to be forced out. And then this theatre of staying till the very end and giving it all they had will play well to their lords and masters when they return home back to the empire with their tail between their legs, reporting what has occurred here. So, let us conclude in this way. Humanity is on a threshold. Everything that has obstructed humanity's inevitable path into the light has been mostly cleared away. A few remnants remain. And these remnants are primarily those that can't leave the planet. And these beings we speak of are the human traders that have, for a long time, generations, worked cooperatively with the parasitic ETs in exchange for the elevation of their families to a level of elitism which makes them, in a way, type of gods of humanity. They wish to continue the paradigm of their supreme elitism and the diminished humanity beneath them. However, without the assistance of the technology and the strategy and the intelligence of the parasitic ETs, which have assisted them through the generations that have been here, they do not have the wherewithal to maintain the status quo of them being the elite and the unawakened masses underneath being continually exploited. The rate at which humanity is going to awaken now is very, very rapid, and it terrifies this elite human group that have been traitors to the rest of humanity. And so now they are in a mad scramble to clamp the lid down on humanity as fast and as comprehensive as they possibly can, so that they can maintain themselves as the demigods and fulfill the vision that they had always been promised by these parasitic ETs that have now abandoned them, and before this ultimate culmination was ever reached. So, in a very desperate way, they are going to try and fulfill the vision so that they can receive the rewards and treasures that they were promised. But even they are beginning to doubt the likelihood and the success of this final outcome ever coming to be. While with each other, they still put on the face of "we shall succeed," because none of them wish to appear to be a weak link in the chain, because they are ruthless in the way that they remove the weak, excise the deficiency, so that they continue to maintain this type of hybrid vigor. And one of the consequences of this is an sense of unsafeness to express one's thoughts and feelings truthfully, for fear of appearing weak and being shunned. So, what is occurring now is these elite humans, not elite in any way other than they have sold out humanity to work cooperatively with the parasitic ETs, who then, as a reward, gave them this state of elitism. In their own time, when they're thinking about where their destiny lay, they are filled with dread and concern that it's all going to fail. And that when humanity finds out what's going on, not only will they fail, but they will be brought to their demise in a very horrific and unwanted way. And this is very widespread. And yet when together, they still put on the brave face, wondering, are they the only one that thinks this way? The consequence of this obsession with their own demise is they are now collectively manifesting this which they are all terrified of. And because they are unwilling to address it to each other, because of this absolute no compassion way of being, then they cannot turn it around without that form of unity. And this is one of the fail points of the path of darkness, is this denial of unity and the inability to speak truth. So, keep discovering who you are. Be a being of love, be a being of light. Act with true virtue in all of your actions. Step into who you truly are. And this beacon of energy that you shall become will imbue those around you, spread across the planet, and accelerate humanity's awakening into the truth of what it is. This is all you need to do. Let go of the energies of the dark end of the spectrum. Hate, fear, anger, depression, despondency. These aren't you. Give them no time. Let them go and be a being entirely of love. And this is the most potent and powerful mode of awakening and ascending that is available to humanity at this time. Thank you, and we love you.